Alright, let's skip the cringy tough man intro and get right into the meat and potatoes. This video is going to use both power scaling calculations and narrative analysis of the Beyblade Metal Fight series to explain how strong and fast the power of Beyblades are. By Metal Fight series, I'm going to be talking about Metal Fusion, Metal Masters, and Metal Fury. Get Shogun Steel out of here, nobody cares about that. To give you guys a quick overview, the Metal Fight series covers our protagonist Jinga Hagane fighting strong bladers with his Beyblade Pegasus. Pegasus goes through evolutions with the first being Storm Pegasus, then Galaxy Pegasus, and finally Big Bang Pegasus, or Cosmic Pegasus if you're a localized to name loser. Each evolution of Pegasus is stronger than the last, and we see rather quickly that although this underrated cinematic masterpiece of television was made for literal babies, a lot of thought and effort went into the extreme power scaling of this character and his top. After we go over notable feats from each series, I will then explain some important power/speed calculations, as well as the power of the bladers themselves, being the people using the Beyblades. This video will then end with me explaining why/how Pegasus negs some of your favorite shonen characters. Finally, go check these guys out who also made videos with a similar topic. A link to all of these videos will be in the description. You better go check them out. Let's start with our first series, Beyblade Metal Fusion. Now, in the beginning, we can tell that our tops aren't that impressive. There are some things they can do, though, that are much more impressive than anything their real-world counterparts could do, like blowing holes through walls or busting through a steel door. The first feat that I believe blasts this series into the absurd is Kyoya's Rock Leon being able to create tornadoes. Now, something that I must get out of the way real quick is that Beyblade tends to show these manifestations/aberrations of the Beyblades that are supposed to represent the Beyblade in question. We can see that Leon is a lion and Pegasus is a Pegasus. While at first glance it may seem that these things are just for the viewer, so they have something to watch that isn't just two circles hitting each other, there are some few moments that indicate that these aberrations are literal. These include characters reacting to these manifestations, or in Jinga's case, making physical contact with it multiple times. The reason why I'm mentioning this now is because I believe one may be able to write off Kyoya's tornadoes as being metaphorical. However, the series makes it abundantly clear that they actually exist. So, we know that tornadoes are capable of taking out houses and can even manage to take out entire towns, which puts these guys at a pretty ridiculous power level already, considering that we're talking about literal tops. The next thing I want to mention is Lightning El Drago's capability to create and manipulate lightning storms. We see that these storms consistently follow Ryuga, the user of the Beyblade, and although this in of itself is not as powerful as Kyoya's tornadoes, we do see that the manipulation of weather is a common thing here. Moving on to something that really interests me is Flame Libro's ability to create sand from rock via supersonic vibrations. We also know that Libro can create sonic waves and blast it at its opponents. Now, this is a pretty cool speed feat which will be mentioned later in the video, but since we're talking about Metal Fusion now, I thought I'd bring it up here. Then we have Pegasus' Stormbringer. Now, this one here doesn't have super heavy calculations, it's just a powerful ability by Storm Pegasus that can manipulate the air in which it's encircling. This is used to counter Ryoto's Pisces as well as burn Phoenix's fire. And now, we're at the feat that I'm pretty sure most of you know about. That is the fact that it's canonical that within the Beyblade verse, that the Red Sea from the Book of Exodus was split with the power of a Beyblade. So this feat actually comes up a couple of times. The first time is when it's talking about the power of Beyblades as a whole, and the second time is when it gets compared directly to the power of Lightning El Drago, which means that El Drago and Pegasus can both presumably reach this level of power, given their status, and the fact that the two of them go fusion wheel to fusion wheel. So how strong of a feat is this? Well, to display that, I'm going to do some amateur calculations to explain how much weight is being pushed back by the spinning force of destruction. So if we were to believe that the path cleared across the Gulf of Suez into the Sinai Peninsula, and assume that the Beyblade left about 3 kilometers of room for people to walk through, and is about 20 kilometers long, and have an average depth of 40 meters, the Beyblade was holding back 2.4 million cubic meters of water. Now, for those who don't know, water is very heavy. And when you convert 2.4 million cubic meters of water into pounds, then we learn that this Beyblade moved 5.3 billion pounds of water. Now, given that these folks had to walk through 20 kilometers, this means that the Beyblade was able to push back this force for a total of 4 hours, given that the average human walks at a pace of about 3 to 4 miles per hour. How impressive is this, though? So trying to convert this into some form of energy, I found this nifty calculator that takes the weight of something and converts it into joules, and found that this is about 900 times stronger than the ability to make lightning strikes. I then converted that into megatons, which is the unit we'll be using for most of this video, which left me with 0.00022 megatons of TNT, which may not seem like a lot, but that's about 1% of the power of a nuclear bomb. Now, this next one is in a similar vein, as we see that the power of Lightning El Drago has been used to destroy a mountain. Now, according to the Versus Wiki, this is much more powerful than the previous feat, as it takes about 100 megatons to vaporize a mountain. Something that goes along with this fact is that Storm Pegasus and Eldrago managed to trash a bunch of buildings and the skyscraper the two of them end up fighting on. While this feat seems rather minor to the mountain level at this point, I'm just trying to show that these high-level feats aren't outliers and are more so a consistent level of power. To sort of go into a final consensus from Metal Fusion, we can see that Storm Pegasus and Lightning Eldrago are mountain level. This is due to the fact that Eldrago's power is stated to be such, but also because we see that there are other feats that go along with this, like the ability to control weather and the destruction of buildings, as well as the parting of the Red Sea. And now we're on to our next series, Beyblade Metal Masters. Now, Metal Masters is rather cracked. There's a shit ton of feats here that don't require as much calculations, but show that our characters here are much stronger. So the first thing to mention here is the fact that power creep exists. We see statements about the newfound power of the new Pegasus is greater than Storm Pegasus, and we see many a blader combat this power. We also see feats like the ocean being constrained/contained happen a couple of times from characters who aren't quite in the upper echelon of power, showing that the bar has now been risen and reset. So as I already mentioned, we know that Galaxy Pegasus is defaultly stronger than Storm Pegasus, given the awesome power of the Bay is mentioned numerous times, and we know that Jinga had a tough time controlling it as compared to the amped up Storm Pegasus. Similarly, Rock Leone also has a massive amount of power amps as we see it control more tornadoes that already exist, and it also acts as a center for tornadoes, which now works inadvertently as we see within the reverse line wind strike. Now, one of the craziest hack abilities to come from the Metal Masters is Gravity Destroyer/Perseus' ability to manipulate gravity. The extent to which this is possible is unknown, but we know that it manages to halt Galaxy Pegasus right in its tracks. Galaxy Pegasus, which we've already gone over, at its base is stronger than the mountain-level Storm Pegasus. So how does our main man Jinga get out of this predicament? Well, it's quite simple. He just powers through it. He just realizes that he can power up, and I quote, smashes through that wall of gravity. Now, you love to see it. Next up is going to be a couple of feats that really just show how cracked this series gets. But before we get into that, let's get into some of the lore of Metal Masters. For those who don't know, the main antagonist is this American organization called Hades Inc. The leader of Hades Inc., named Dr. Ziggurat, ends up creating a new type of energy source that is harnessed by the power of Beyblades. To do this, he ended up designing a Beyblade specifically designed after Pegasus and Eldrago, as they are seen as the most powerful right-spinning Beyblade and left-spinning Beyblade, respectively. This new Beyblade is called Twisted Tempo. Ziggurat plans to sell this power to the highest bidder. To show off this power, Ziggurat ends up destroying the land around Hades Inc., which includes vaporizing a lake, an ocean, and a mountain all at once. Not only is this an incredible feat of power, but it also acts as an expert critique of capitalist America, showing that they're willing to dehumanize the power of Beyblade to turn it into a destructive power capable of wiping out humanity for the sole purpose of making money. But that's not the only feat from Twisted Tempo. Now, Dr. Ziggurat is a legitimate physicist, and he mentions real-world physics within the series. While doing this, he explains that Twisted Tempo was designed to have a fusion wheel to manipulate space and time. Yes, you heard that right. This Beyblade can manipulate space and time. I know what you guys are thinking. But tough man, if it's only limited manipulation, then that doesn't mean much. I mean, there's a big difference between Time Stop from JoJo's and... Yeah, the Beyblade makes a black hole. This black hole exists, and we see that both Galaxy Pegasus and Ray Striker resist this pull. In fact, the two of them get out of this because of Eldrago and Zio's interference. While this is not necessarily a concrete AP feat, it displays a monumental amount of gravity/spatial manipulation resistance. Moving back to attack potency feats, if you thought the last Spiral Force feat was impressive, you're funny, as we already know this should be baby shit for the likes of Galaxy Pegasus. The real feat here is when Pegasus absorbs the energy from the melting down Spiral Force. This is because the meltdown from Spiral Force is explicitly stated to destroy the planet, and is literally scaled to being much more powerful than actual nuclear meltdowns. So what do you think happens to this energy? Well, the answer is quite simple. You see, Galaxy Pegasus takes this energy, rides out into space, and expels said energy. That's right, Galaxy Pegasus absorbs all the energy stated to blow up the planet and rides into space to blow it up. Now, the only thing here that I haven't mentioned is that Pegasus needed the help of Meteor El Drago to absorb this energy, but it absorbed it nonetheless. This happens, and the Beyblade survives. It absorbs the energy, rides into space, detonates said energy, and flies back to the planet in a matter of minutes. Although severely damaged at this point, it's abundantly clear that this is a planetary durability feat that stems from the energy of another Beyblade, which means that in both attack potency and durability, these spinning tops are at the planetary level. And guess what? We got one more series to go. And now we've reached our final series, Metal Fury. Now, Metal Fury doesn't seem to have that many huge concrete displays of power as compared to Metal Masters, so this section is going to go over some narrative beats to show that A, power creep conquers all, sorry my beloved Tech Orange Piccolo, and B, these planetary feats are not just outliers, but are actually displayed and casually displayed throughout the series. So first off, we need to mention that Galaxy Pegasus, the planetary top, gets a direct upgrade into Big Bang Pegasus by absorbing something called the Star Fragment. Pegasus is not the only Bey to have this though, as the point of Metal Fury is for Jinga to go around and find the other legendary Bladers who've absorbed this power. Similarly to the introduction of Galaxy Pegasus, it can be seen being more powerful than its predecessor right off the get-go. The reason why they needed to do this was that they needed to stop the revival of the God of Destruction. No, not that one. This God of Destruction is named Nemesis, who wants to bring forth the Black Sun. And don't worry, we'll talk about the Black Sun soon, I just want to mention it here to set the scene. Next up, we see Ryuga and El Drago Destructor, being Meteor El Drago's upgrade, manage to control volcanoes. This aligns with the ability of controlling weather and other natural disasters. This gets amped later in the series when we see Ryuga trash a much bigger mountainous scenery. What then happens is a bunch of plot where our protags gather the legendary Bladers. Our next massive feat is Ryuga saying that Proto-Nemesis, which is the first form of the final antagonist, is the strongest power he's ever felt. This would include the power of Spiral Force that could blow up the planet and make a black hole. From here, Nemesis absorbs all of the star fragments, being 9 others in total, meaning that this power that Ryuga stated just got 9 times more powerful. After that, we see that this overwhelming power of Nemesis refuses to go down. It fights 9 of the legendary Bladers, 1 being Jinga and the other 8 being comparable to Jinga. While this is happening, we can see that there are natural disasters occurring all over the world. After being seemingly defeated, we see Diablo Nemesis come back and bring forth the Black Sun. Jinga then absorbs the power of the other legendary Bladers similar to Nemesis and faces him one-on-one. From here, Jinga absorbs the power of every Beyblade in the world and manages to defeat Nemesis for good. Now, like I said, I didn't mention many concrete feats, but we'll be getting into those soon. Just know that at bare minimum, we have to conclude that the power of Pegasus is tens, if not hundreds of times more powerful than the Beyblade planetary feats, given the narrative analysis of the power of Nemesis and how Big Bang Pegasus gains even more power from there. Before we conclude scaling the attack potency and durability, let's address a couple more things. The first is the speed of these Beyblades. While this is something that it's just as ridiculous as their attack potency, we can easily find that there seems to be a pretty massive range here. So at their lowest, we can use Flame Libra to scale these Beyblades at the speed of sound. This is because we see that Libra can make supersonic projectiles and manipulate supersonic vibrations. These projectiles have been tanked and dodged by more powerful bladers. Also within Metal Fusion, in Episode 1, Storm Pegasus is stated to be faster than the eye can see, which is pretty insane. We also know that Storm Pegasus can move so quickly that it can manipulate the air to cause flames and other elements be expelled from the area in which it's rotating. Furthermore, I mentioned that Lightning El Drago can manipulate lightning, which would imply that it and Storm Pegasus are fighting at such speeds. But all of that is nothing compared to the max speed of Pegasus, as we see it fly throughout space multiple times throughout the series. The first time this happens is within the finale of Metal Fusion, where Pegasus and El Drago fly outside of the atmosphere. But we also see Pegasus fly to the edge of the universe and back for the Galaxy Nova. We also see Galaxy Pegasus do this quite a bit in Metal Masters. First while utilizing its new special move, Stardust Driver, but also when it needs to dispel the power of Spiral Force. Finally, we see Big Bang Pegasus do this against Diablo Nemesis, pulling off its final special move, the Super Cosmic Nova. So, the edge of the galaxy is kind of far away, like 950,000 light years away. This means that Pegasus traveled 5.5 quintillion miles in about like 30 seconds, or 180 quadrillion miles per second, aka 966 billion times the speed of light. Now, this would mean that the characters would have to have reaction times to comprehend and control what's going on, meaning that they have monumental superhuman reaction times. And speaking of superhuman, let's get into the second section I have before covering the final feats of power, the superhuman nature of the characters within the series. Something that comes up time and time again is the power of the Blader Spirit. This is just some form of emotional amp that the characters receive that we can quickly find out can serve as some explanation as to how these characters can take this punishment. An example of this is the way Jinga chats his way through Ryuto in Metal Fusion, who imposed horrible vibrations to make Jinga tweak. He overcomes this just by talking about the Blader Spirit. Also, there's the fact that when a Blader and their Bae have a strong connection, their relationship seems to be almost symbiotic, and that the Blader can take the punishment of the Beyblade and vice versa. But what if I told you this isn't the only explanation? You'd have to believe me because you and I both know you haven't watched this shit, and you're just dying for an explanation. Throughout all three series, we consistently see our characters pull off superhuman feats of strength. First off is Benkei, who we can see wrap himself behind a big tree and run with it as training. Although this is not as impressive in terms of anime scaling, we know that in verse these are supposed to be normal human beings as compared to supernatural people. Next up is by far the funniest of these feats, as we see Kenta bench press like 315 pounds to train for Beyblade. Kenta is 9 years old. Moving on to Metal Fury, we see Jinga do 10,000 launch reps while lifting 3 tires with just his right arm. Google told me that a tire weighs about 25 pounds, meaning that Jinga is lifting 75 pounds here. While this isn't much compared to the world record of what seems to be one-arm rows being 375 to 420 pounds, but Jinga here actually does 10,000 reps, which is certainly more durable and shows more endurance than anything done by an actual human being. And finally, we see Aguma manage to push up a helicopter from falling off a building. Bro is literally matching Steve Rogers in an arm wrestling match. Now that I've gone over that, let's finally scale Big Bang Pegasus. Here is the other numbers heavy section of this video, and I'm going to explain that we can do this by going down 2 routes. The first route is that we can scale the Black Sun and thus Nemesis and compare Pegasus from there. The second, which is more of a highball, involves finding the difference between Storm and Galaxy Pegasus and then applying that hypothetical multiplier to Galaxy Pegasus to find the strength of Big Bang Pegasus, given that it goes through a similar evolution. Once again, these are rather number heavy, so if you just want to skip right to the highlights, I'll put up some timestamps for you to go to. We might be able to see how big the Black Sun is and scale Nemesis from there. Since we know that Pegasus scales to Nemesis, this is a worthwhile project. This is our first route. Our sun produces 35 billion megatons of TNT every second. If we were to say that the Black Sun is half of the size of Earth given by this visual, then it would be 220 times smaller than our sun. Dividing this power by 220 gives us 160 million megatons of TNT per second, or 8 billion times the power of a nuclear bomb. Since Jinga manages to combat this power, I'm cool with saying that he's either equivalent to it, or we could say he's twice as powerful given that he eclipses it, meaning that he's within the dwarf star levels of power. Since both Galaxy Pegasus and Storm Pegasus have concrete feats, we can manage to calculate the difference in terms of multipliers between the two. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said about Galaxy Pegasus and Big Bang Pegasus. This route is going to find the difference between Storm Pegasus and Galaxy, and then use the multiplier on Galaxy Pegasus to see how strong Big Bang Pegasus is. Essentially, we're going to calc the difference between Storm Pegasus and Galaxy Pegasus, and then use that multiplier as a formula to calculate Galaxy Pegasus' evolution into Big Bang Pegasus. This is our second route. Something that's important to note here is that the weaker Storm Pegasus and Lightning Eldrago are, the bigger gap in power there would be between Storm Pegasus and Galaxy Pegasus, meaning that Big Bang Pegasus would be stronger the weaker we scale Storm Pegasus. For the sake of concrete scaling though, let's say that Storm Pegasus is mountain level, and we know that Galaxy is planetary. It takes roughly 100 megatons to destroy a mountain according to the Versus Wiki, and 23 million megatons to blow up the Earth. This means that Storm Pegasus got 230,000 times more powerful through its evolution. Now that we found the difference there, if we were to apply it to Cosmic Pegasus, then we know that it is 230,000 times more powerful than the planet-busting Galaxy Pegasus. Multiplying the 23 million required for planet busting by the 230,000 multiplier means that Big Bang Pegasus has the power of 529 billion megatons. We're not done yet though, as we know that Cosmic Pegasus then absorbs the power of the 8 star fragments. If we were to assume that all of these Beyblades are as strong as each other for simplicity's sake, given that they have the same exact evolution, then we multiply Cosmic Pegasus' power by 8, giving us 4.2 trillion megatons of TNT in terms of attack potency. And I'm going to call this the final number, almost. Now I know what you guys are already typing out, but tough man, Jenga gets the amp from all of the bladers in the world. Shouldn't that mean something? While it might, something we need to remember is just how weak the average blader is. We know that most of them get walled by Storm Pegasus, which we've already established is like 10 billion times weaker than Big Bang Pegasus' strength. So if we were to assume that they were a fraction of that power, it wouldn't add much to Jenga's total. What would, however, would be the 2 to 3 times friendship boost we hear about way back when at the beginning of Metal Fusion. Multiplying this 4.2 by 3 would mean that Big Bang Pegasus' final calculations are 12.6 trillion megatons of TNT in terms of attack potency and presumably durability, or 550,000 times more powerful than a planetary attack, or the equivalent of 620 trillion nuclear bombs. It's abundantly clear that this is way stronger than the first route if we're assuming that this 12.6 trillion number can combat the 160 million per second number from the first route. To be exact, this calculation is 78,750 times more powerful than our first calculation, which would still place him in the mid-level star range. Now, I'm sure some of you guys are wondering, what is this guy's weakness? And the answer to that is pretty simple. Bigger hacks. That's not to say that Beyblade characters can't fight back against hacks, just that they usually don't have hacks themselves. If they beat a character with crazy abilities, it's usually because we can see that they have the speed and power to back it up, not because there's some crazy hack ability. That's not to say they don't. However, given that there's many things that indicate bladers have resistances to mind manipulation, and the Beyblades themselves resist the power of gravity, space, and time if we're taking Twisted Tempo literally. So now that I've explained the overwhelming power of Jinga Hagane and Big Bang Pegasus, let's run them through the gauntlet and compare him to some of the big shonen characters. First, I want to mention the GOAT, Ryomen Fraud Kuna from Jujutsu Kaisen. Now, this is the only section that will have spoilers for an ongoing story, so if you don't want JJK spoilers, skip to the next chapter of the video. Now, Sukuna is very strong. With a wide array of abilities at his disposal, it is irrefutable that he is one of, if not the strongest character from Jujutsu Kaisen. Sukuna's main ability is to slice and dice things via a particular motion he makes with his hands. His strongest ability by far is Dismantle, which is his ability to cut existence, where he sends a slice which is a powerful attack that can seemingly cleave through any amount of durability. Sukuna is no slouch without this attack, however, as we see him casually fight and fly, destroying cities, skyscrapers, and clearing blocks with ease. A singular punch from him causes him to unravel highways and roads. Something we don't see too often from Sukuna are his flame abilities, which burn so hot he killed a personification of fire. He has some powerful healing capabilities like reverse curse technique and his own transformation, which acts as a get out of jail free card. Finally, he has his domain, Malevolent Shrine, which instantly slices and dices anyone and anything within its vast range. Yeah, Pegasus negs. I understand that JJK is a series of hacks and Sukuna has many strong abilities, but I'm sure you guys already noted that Pegasus completely and utterly eclipses this guy in attack potency. But tough man, I already hear you typing out, Malevolent Shrine is an instant hit. How is the blader getting out of that? The answer is quite simple. Beyblade speed blitzes. Something worth noting in JJK is the fact that the verse isn't that fast. The fastest character we actually see gets a speed calc of Mach 3, which if you remember, is faster than the absolute lowest we can put Beyblade, but it's hardly a fraction of where we can more reasonably place it, which is beyond the speed of light. This combined with the fact that JJK abilities usually require some form of chanting and arm movement, which yes, Sukuna is the best at pulling off. It's clear though that Pegasus' speed can take out Sukuna before he even has a moment to consider what's going on. Also, hey Sukuna, good fire there. It beats out Jogo, who's easily city block level. Too bad Pegasus just used the Stormbringer to completely and utterly snuff it out. Also, I need to mention that, yes, Sukuna does have healing capabilities, but going off of Hikari, we know that RCT does not work if the user's head is obliterated instantly, which I do believe Pegasus is capable of doing. Before we leave here, I want to mention that it is possible for Big Bang Pegasus to just downright solo the verse, considering that many JJK characters are rather weak compared to the Planet Busters in a shonen, say like Dragon Ball. There are some characters though that I think could cause some trouble through pure hacks alone. Obviously there's Gojo with Infinity, but also Yuta Okotsu with the power of Rika and his copy ability. Also, both of their domains, if they hit, could stop the Blader right in their tracks. Though this is the case, the overwhelming destructive power and speed of Big Bang Pegasus is probably clearing both of these guys before they even have time to react, given how slow JJK is as a verse comparatively. Moving on, I wanted to mention JoJo's Bizarre Adventure for what I think is the first time on this channel. For this section, we're going to consider the poster boy of the series, Jotaro Kujo, with his stand, Star Platinum. Now, Star Platinum is an incredibly strong ability that moves incredibly fast with incredible precision. We see this speed and precision is capable of catching a bullet fired from a gun right next to Jotaro's head before it makes contact with his head. Even more impressive are the ways in which the stand's speed scales to Silver Chariot, who was capable of combating something traveling at the speed of light while bouncing in between reflections. Comparatively to Jujutsu Kaisen, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure may scale a bit lower in terms of attack potency, but Star Platinum is typically not one of those stands, as we see it combat Dio and the World, which we see casually toss around a steamroller. Finally, there's Jotaro's strongest ability, the Time Stop, which does exactly what it sounds like. Jotaro can stop time for about 5 seconds. This, in tandem with its incredible speed and power, makes Jotaro a rather formidable shonen character. But can he beat the overwhelming power of Big Bang Pegasus? Probably not. To be blunt, I think it's rather obvious that Pegasus speed blitzes Jotaro rather easily, as other than scaling the Silver Chariot, there aren't many displays of speed that transcend the speed of light from the JoJo series. While one might say that Star Platinum can beat out the durability of the Bladers themselves, may I remind you that there's a good amount of evidence suggesting that the Bladers are vicariously being damaged while their Beyblades are being damaged, meaning that they too are tanking the attacks of their opponent. This would suggest that the durability of these guys, being Jinga himself, are far beyond that of an average human and could maybe even downright tank the destructive force of Star Platinum. Although this is the case, I will say that I have a much harder time accepting that Big Bang Pegasus negs JoJo's the way it does Jujutsu Kaisen. While it most certainly clears most stands, the 4 in particular that may stop Jinga in his tracks are Golden Experience Requiem, Made in Heaven, D4C Love Train, and Wonder of You. To start out of order, I think Made in Heaven has a case for just speed blitzing Pegasus anyway, and using said speed to take out Jinga. The other two, being GER and Wonder of You, have massive fate hacks / manipulation. Now, I do think that GER has a much better case than Wonder of You, given that we know GER can act on its own without Giorno's knowledge, and just has some of the highest levels of hacks in the series. Wonder of You has similar fate manipulation, but given that it's supposed to be the ultimate defensive stand, it is possible that the pursuit of the Doctor by Pegasus could be stopped by the stand. Also, since such a destructive force would be hurling towards the Doctor, it's safe to say that the calamity that would follow would not be anything to slouch at. Finally, Love Train is another ultimate dimensionally defensive stand, but also has the power of Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, which could theoretically pull out another Jinga or Pegasus, which would annihilate the original when making contact. One might also bring up the other big hack stands like Tusk Act 4, Ball Breaker, and Soft and Wet Go Beyond, but many of these stands have to hit for their effects to work, and it is my belief that Pegasus would clear these before this would even happen. And now, we're at Dragon Ball. I'm mainly a Dragon Ball channel at this point, so we gotta mention Goku. It's clear that Goku clears Beyblade in the current state of Super, given the monumental power of Super Saiyan God, and how he gets millions of times stronger from there. But, what if we were to take Beyblade and determine at what point does it no longer beat Dragon Ball, as it obviously clears early Dragon Ball? To do some early Dragon Ball scaling, we gotta keep in mind that every character I'm about to mention here either scales directly to Goku or Goku himself outright beats. Firstly, we know that the likes of Master Roshi can blow up the moon, which is a pretty big feat. Something even more powerful is the fact that Demon King Piccolo mentions that he had the power to annihilate the surface of the planet. It's then typically perceived that characters in the Saiyan saga then reach planetary levels of power, given that we see Vegeta wipe out a planet, and King Vegeta, who is weaker than his son, destroy multiple planets with a wave of his hand. From here, we know that the Namek Saga is roughly star level, since we see that Frieza is hundreds of thousands of times stronger than the Saiyan Saga characters, and then we have our nifty Cell statement where he says that he can clear the solar system with his power. We know that Goku himself manages to surpass this power of Cell in the early Buu Saga. And now, we can talk about Beyblade. When looking at one of the most concrete Beyblade feats, we can see that the power of Spiral Force is planetary, meaning that Pegasus, in terms of attack potency and durability, is clearing up until the 23rd World Tournament, aka the finale of Original Dragon Ball. Something we have to remember, though, is that this is before Pegasus' evolution, which we've already established is wickedly beyond this power. And here's where I'm going to bust out everyone's favorite narrative tool, power levels. So, post-World Tournament, Goku and Piccolo have a power level of 300 to 400 pre-charging up, meaning that it's safe to say that this is the minimum power level needed to blow up a planet, and thus the power level of Spiral Force. This may seem low, but the lower this number is, although means the higher we're ranking Dragon Ball, the lower we're scaling Pegasus. If we were then to apply the multiplier we've already established from the final scaling section, then we see that Big Bang Pegasus' power level will theoretically be 80,500,000 at the beginning of Metal Fury, or about 60% of the power of Full Power Frieza. If we were to then multiply this power level by the Star Fragment and Friendship Boost, then we get a final number of a power level of 1.9 billion from Big Bang Pegasus. This, in terms of power levels, would make Pegasus about 13 times more powerful than Super Saiyan Namek Saga Goku, which actually does align with the star range of power. Finally, it is clear though that Pegasus would get walled by the Cell Saga characters given how much they easily clip the power of Frieza. Dragon Ball characters at this point are also shown to have similar resistances to things like gravity and spatial manipulation, so Beyblade can't even out-hack the Dragon Ball verse here. And that's it. That's how strong Beyblade and the power of Pegasus is. Let me know what you guys think of this. I know this was a much more numbers-heavy video than anything else I've made, but obviously it was fun nonetheless. And just remember, you may have a favorite character, they may be powerful, they may even blow up the planet, but even they must yield to the power of the Blader's spirit. Have a good day, everyone. Happy April Fools.